Dungana Gimiga Womana Getjadena. My name's Dave Widders, I'm a proud Anawan man, born and bred in Armidale, and my descendancy, my bloodline, goes here for thousands of years. So for us here who are in Anawan country, our neighbours actually describe us as snow people or snow country. Why? Because it snowed up here a lot. Yeah. So again we would have had a word for snow, where the mob down the coast probably didn't have a word for snow. We're roughly 1 hour to the north, or 45 minutes to an hour to the north, east, west, south of Armidale. You'll come across the boundaries and the border of the Anawan people. The importance of sharing story is about teaching people about that country. And why are those stories important to the Anawan people here? Because those stories are captured in our values, they're captured in our culture, they're captured in our way of thinking, our lifestyle. And those values and the ways we've lived have sustained our living here for thousands of years. So again, I go back to, we must have been doing something right for each other, for our country, to sustain that type style of living for a long time. At school I was taught Aboriginal people have been here for 40,000 years. As I got older in the teenage years, they're talking like 60,000 years, and they're even putting things at 80 to 85,000 years. And Warrnambool at the moment, they're talking about 120,000 years. So it's sort of like Aboriginal people had systems in place. They had structures, they had governance, they had all these other things that were working pretty effectively. They've mucked that up in 200 odd years. They've tried to come in and teach us a different way, but their description of us were they're nomadic, they're savages, they're the missing link, they're the uncivilised. Where what I've learned from my culture, we're talking about engineers, we're talking about scientists, we're talking about people who navigated with star systems, who built river, fish traps in the rivers, which they're talking about aquaculture. So the example, I think, of Brewarrina, them fish traps out there are dated 40,000 years old. So we were doing that sort of stuff way before white fellas come here. Yeah, at the moment we're at the Armidale Cultural Centre and Keeping Place, which I'm currently on the board here also. But it's a place where we're really trying to reinforce Aboriginal employment. We're really trying to promote Aboriginal culture, art, performing arts, singing, dancing, and just making this a place for all people in Armidale and the surrounds to come in and see the beauty of our culture through our art and our stories. A place of gathering where we'd like people to come, Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal, to meet, to greet, sit down, yarn and share stories. If anyone knows the Widders family, they're often known as football, rugby league players, but I was the black sheep of the family, so to speak, eh? And I played soccer growing up all my life, and I love soccer. I was really lucky. It's funny, the school I'm working in now is where I started playing soccer, and a gentleman by the name of Mr. Valance, Jack Valance, there's an oval named after you in Armidale. Got me into soccer, made me love soccer, made me enjoy soccer, and just kept me into it, and taught me a lot about not just soccer, but I think life in general. One of the proudest moments of my life is when I got to play with the Australian schoolboys, where we toured over to Southeast Asia. There, being a shy little blackfella from Armidale, I'm a country boy. I went away with boys that were from Melbourne and Sydney and like all the Greek and Italians and all these. I was the only blackfella in the whole squad. We take a team down to the national and Aboriginal titles every year in Nowra, and hopefully we'll get some exposure to some of our kids in our region and hopefully get them onto a pathway of a good education, good health, but also a great career in soccer. So my love and passion is soccer, as well as my Anawan culture and stuff like that, so yeah. The fauna and the flora, it's the people, it's everything that exists, everything we see in here. There's always a story attached with it. So the stories that are in particular up here in Anawan country only relate to things that are here on Anawan country. So like I said, we have a story of the two brothers, which we call one's Iakomba, which is the big brother, and Ilbaminda, which is our little brother. And in our landscape, there's two mountains that actually depict who they are and why are they apart, and the story goes into that, which we're going to be sharing, in our near future, that whole story. And behind every story, there's always a meaning behind it. Yeah, and those stories, that meaning connects us to our country. It teaches us about I think greed. It teaches us about sharing and caring. It teaches us about love. It teaches us about humility, and it teaches us about respect. We don't have a word for shark here in Annan country. And people say, why not? I say, well, have you ever seen a shark swimming up the Jumeirah Creek in Armidale? So we don't create words for things that don't exist here. But if you go to the east of us, we have the Gumbaynggirr people, the Dunghutti people, the Biripi people, who are saltwater people. They have a word for shark because that actually exists in their space. And that's why I think language is so important, because language connects us to our place. So out of the 250 odd different language groups plus here in Australia of Aboriginal languages, they only have words specific to their place. How can we revive our language? And it goes back to pockets of our history where, particularly under the Mission Days, the Aboriginal Protection Act days, you weren't allowed to be Aboriginal. So that meant you can't speak your language. You cannot dance your dances. You cannot practice your ceremonial things here. You have to now assimilate into white Australia. So you have to speak English, you have to learn Christianity, and you have to dress like white people do. So what does that mean for me as an Aboriginal man today in 2021? It meant my great-grandfather, George Widders, wasn't allowed to speak his language under the Aboriginal Protection Act in New South Wales. So he couldn't pass it on to my grandfather. My grandfather couldn't pass it on to my dad. Dad couldn't pass it on to me. So within 4 generations, we lost that fluency of speaking Annan language. So we've started to dig that up. We have, I think, sitting around 430 odd words we've dug up of Annan language. That has been what we call hidden or sleeping for a while, because the Kamilaroi or Gomeroi people, which is out to our west, they have a dictionary of up to a couple of thousand words. The Gumbaynggirr fellas to our east, they have dictionaries of, hundreds to thousands of words, where we're still sort of sitting at about 480. And I think that was based on our size. If you look at the nations around us, they're a lot more larger. So the Gomeroi people, their language speakers were in such a vast broadness of land, which is like this, compared to Annan country, which is like this. So the impact of colonisation here in the 1830s was sharp, it was sudden, it was quick. So a lot of our language speakers are wiped out in those early days of massacres and whatnot. But I think the Aboriginal Protection Days, where you had to assimilate, is that time when we lost a lot of that stuff. It's not only language that defines our boundaries, but landscape can also define that too. So if we go to the east of Armidale, it's a place called Point Lookout, and if anyone knows that area, Annan country, there's a lot of granite country. So you'll often see a lot of granite around our country here. So as we drop off to the east to the Point Lookout, there's a massive big drop off, and the land clearly changes dramatically. So you can see it, you can see the ocean from out there. So that to me points out that there's a boundary of the 2 different groups of people, the Gumbaynggirr, who are saltwater people, compared to the Annan fellas, who are described as snow country people or granite fellas. To the south, when we talk about an area around the Moonbi Ranges, if anyone's been down that range, a lot of granite country, but as it drops down and gets down to Bendham or Tamworth area, it changes dramatically. It just goes out in this flat plain sort of country. To the east, we're talking about a boundary around Bundarish or Tingarish, to that area. But you can see the landscape change. Tingha is just granite country. If anyone's been through Tingha, you'll just notice granite everywhere. I think the houses are even granite out there. But as you go the other side, Inverell flattens out dramatically. What I love about this region, I think the people is something that I really love about Armidale itself, because I've got good mates who are both sides, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal. But my vision, my dream, I suppose, down the end of the track is that living on Annan country, where there's a really nice creek, where I can go down and catch some craybob or eel or fish, and just sit on my veranda and just chill out and relax and take in the views of. I love looking at the mountains around our country. I love the gorges. The gorges are absolutely beautiful. And I just love all these little brooks and streams and creeks that exist all across Annan country, from down to Walker, all the way up here to Armidale, out to the gorge country, and even a bit north of here. So the water, the rivers, the creeks I love, the mountains I'm just captivated by. For me, the landscape is something I love about it. The people is something I love about it. And for me, unravelling our history and our culture is something I really, really got a love and passion about at the moment. because it's unfolding, it's telling us a story. Black and white history of it. Yeah.